The diplomatic vessel horizon cut through the purple skies of Cathara Prime like a silver needle. Inside the observation deck, Lisa Grant stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the alien city grow larger in the viewport. The buildings were strange, made of crystalline materials that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. Nothing like home, nothing like Earth. Next to her, Kevin Moore kept adjusting his translation device. The small earpiece kept slipping out, and he pushed it back in place for the 5th time in as many minutes. He was nervous. Everyone was nervous, though most of them hid it better than Kevin did. Captain Richard Hayes stood near the command console, reading through the protocol documents one more time. He had already memorized them, but reading gave him something to do with his hands, something to focus on besides the butterflies in his stomach. This was it. First official contact with the Galactic Assembly. Humanity's big moment. Their chance to join the community of spacefaring species and prove they belonged among the stars. The ship touched down on a massive landing platform with barely a whisper of sound. Through the viewports, Lisa could see crowds of aliens waiting. Dozens of different species, maybe hundreds of individuals, all gathered to see the newcomers. To see if humans were worth their time. Ambassador Helen Cooper was the first to walk down the ramp. She moved with calm confidence, her diplomatic training evident in every step. Behind her came 2 security officers, Jake Peterson and Amy Rodriguez. They wore formal uniforms but carried no weapons. The assembly had been very clear about that rule. No weapons for first contact. The air outside was warm and smelled strange, sweet, but with an underlying scent of something sharp, almost metallic. Lisa wrinkled her nose but said nothing. This was an alien world. Everything would be strange. The alien delegates were even more impressive up close. The Vryn towered over everyone, massive reptilian creatures covered in natural armor plating. Their claws clicked against the platform as they moved, and their yellow eyes tracked every movement the humans made. They looked like something out of a monster movie, except they were real and they were in charge. Smaller insect-like creatures clustered together in groups, their mandibles clicking in constant communication. The translation software struggled to keep up, spitting out fragments of conversation that made little sense. Something about weakness, something about soft flesh. Even the peaceful-looking species had defenses. The Milani looked almost angelic with their flowing robes and gentle movements. But Lisa could see the crystalline spikes growing from their shoulders and arms. Natural weapons grown from their own bodies. The chief Vryn delegate stepped forward. His name tag identified him as Krathax, though the pronunciation guide suggested humans would never get it quite right. He was even larger up close, his head level with the second-story windows of nearby buildings. Helen extended her hand in the traditional human greeting. Krathax looked at it for a long moment, then ignored it completely. His gaze swept over the human delegation with obvious contempt. Ambassador Cooper, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. The translation device turned his words into heavily accented English. We welcome you to the assembly, though many question the wisdom of admitting your kind. Helen smiled politely and lowered her hand. We appreciate the opportunity, Delegate Krathax. Humanity is eager to join the galactic community and contribute what we can. Krathax's yellow eyes fixed on Jake and Amy. He stared at them for several uncomfortable seconds before speaking again. Your guards, where are their weapons? Surely you do not come to the assembly defenseless. Helen's smile never wavered. We come in peace, Delegate Krathax. We saw no need for weapons. The sound that rippled through the assembled aliens was hard to describe. Part laughter, part disbelief, part something else entirely. The translation software gave up trying to interpret the emotional context and just played the raw sounds. Krathax leaned down, bringing his massive head closer to Helen's level. His breath smelled of sulfur and something burnt. No need or no capability. His claws extended with a sound like metal scraping metal. Every species here evolved to survive. The Vryn have our claws and armor. The Chithrax have venom and exoskeletons. The Milani can regenerate lost limbs. What do humans have? Before Helen could answer, one of the insect creatures pushed forward. Its compound eyes reflected the humans in 1,000 tiny images. Perhaps we should test them, it said, the translation coming through with an edge of malice. See what these soft creatures are made of. The temperature on the platform seemed to drop several degrees. Lisa felt her muscles tense automatically, her body preparing for a threat before her conscious mind had fully processed it. Next to her, she saw Kevin's breathing quicken, his pupils dilate. Every human on the platform was having the same reaction. Millions of years of evolution kicking in, preparing them for danger. Helen stepped forward, placing herself between the aggressive alien and her team. "That won't be necessary," she said firmly. "We're here for dialogue, not demonstration." Krathax made that grinding laugh sound again. "The galaxy does not care for your dialogue, human. It cares only for strength. You have 3 of your days to convince the assembly that your species deserves membership. If you cannot show us your weapons, show us your worth." He turned away, his massive tail nearly knocking over a smaller delegate. The other aliens followed, some casting curious glances back at the humans, others already dismissing them as unimportant. Only one creature remained behind. A small furry thing about the size of a house cat, with large eyes and delicate hands. "Do not mind Krathax," it said, its voice coming through the translator as high and apologetic. "He is old-fashioned, but he is not wrong about the Assembly's concerns. You must understand, humans are the first species to reach spacefaring status without obvious biological advantages. It makes the others nervous." Helen knelt down to the creature's level, which seemed to surprise it. "What's your name?" "I am called Pip. I am Paxian. I will be your guide during your stay." "Well, Pip, I think the Assembly is going to be surprised by what humans can do." Pip's ears twitched in what might have been doubt. "I hope you are right, Ambassador. For your sake." As Pip led them toward the assembly complex, Lisa walked alongside Amy. The 2 security officers exchanged a glance. They had both seen the way the aliens looked at them, like prey, like something weak and vulnerable. Amy's jaw tightened. "They have no idea," she muttered quietly. Lisa nodded. "None at all." The assembly complex was massive, a structure that seemed to defy gravity with its sweeping curves and impossible angles. Inside, the corridors were wide enough to accommodate the largest species, and the ceilings soared overhead. Everything was designed to make visitors feel small. Their assigned quarters were comfortable, at least. Human-sized furniture had been provided, along with food and water that Kevin's preliminary scans confirmed were safe for consumption. Someone had done their research. That evening, the team gathered to discuss their situation. Helen sat at the head of the table, her diplomatic mask finally slipping to show the worry underneath. "They think we're weak," she said bluntly. "Every species here evolved with natural weapons or defenses. We didn't. To them, that makes us inferior." Kevin leaned forward. "But we did evolve defenses, just not physical ones. Our brains, our adaptability, our social structures, those are all defensive adaptations." "Try explaining that to Krathax," Jake said dryly. "He looks like he could bite through steel." "Our big brains aren't going to impress him." Helen drummed her fingers on the table, thinking. "Then we need to show them what our brains can do. What humans can do when we put our minds to something." "How?" Amy asked. "We have 3 days to convince an entire galactic assembly that we belong here." "That's not a lot of time." Lisa had been quiet, but now she spoke up. "We show them what we've been doing since we arrived. What every human does automatically in a new environment." Everyone looked at her. "We've been analyzing," Lisa continued. "Kevin's been studying the local ecology. Jake and I have been mapping exits and assessing threats. You've been reading the social dynamics, Ambassador. We've been doing what humans always do. We've been figuring out how to survive." Helen's eyes lit up with understanding. "And that's what they need to see. Not that we have claws or venom, but that we have something better. We have the ability to adapt to anything." Kevin nodded slowly. "Every species here evolved for their specific environment. But humans evolved to adapt to any environment. That's our weapon." "Exactly," Helen said. She stood up, her confidence returning. "Tomorrow we go before the assembly, and we show them what it really means to be human." Outside the windows, the alien city glowed in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Krathax and the other delegates were probably discussing the weak, defenseless humans who thought they deserved a place among the stars. They had no idea what was coming. Humans had spent millions of years turning every disadvantage into an advantage. They had survived ice ages and predators, diseases and disasters. They had walked out of Africa and conquered a planet with nothing but their minds and their stubborn refusal to give up. 3 days to prove themselves? Helen smiled. Humans had done more with less. The assembly hall was even more impressive than Lisa had imagined. The massive amphitheater had been carved from a single piece of crystalline stone. with seats arranged in rising circles that seemed to go up forever. Representatives from 47 different species filled those seats, thousands of eyes watching as Helen Cooper walked to the speaker's platform at the center. The platform was small, leaving the speaker exposed and vulnerable. Probably intentional, Lisa thought. Make the speaker feel insignificant. Make them understand their place in the grand scheme of things. But Helen walked with her head high, her steps confident. She took her position and looked around at the assembled aliens with a calm, professional smile. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice amplified by technology she couldn't see. "Humanity thanks you for this opportunity. We understand your concerns about our apparent lack of natural defenses." Krathax's voice boomed from somewhere high up in the Vryn section. "Then you admit your weakness?" Helen didn't flinch. "I admit we evolved differently. Earth is a death world by your standards. Gravity 20% higher than the galactic average. Atmospheric oxygen levels that would be toxic to most species here. Predators that hunted our ancestors for millions of years." A ripple of sound moved through the assembly. Pip had explained that death worlds were rare. Most species evolved on calm, stable planets where survival was a matter of finding food and reproducing. Earth was different. Earth had tried to kill humanity at every turn. Helen continued, her voice steady. "Humans didn't develop claws because we developed something better. Tools. We didn't develop armor because we learned to work together. And we didn't develop venom because we learned to think, to adapt, to overcome." A Milani delegate spoke up, her voice like wind chimes. "Pretty words, Ambassador. But the galaxy runs on more than philosophy. Can you demonstrate this adaptation?" Helen smiled. "I can, Dr. Kevin Moore. Would you join me, please?" Kevin walked to the platform, trying to ignore the thousands of alien eyes watching his every move. His hands wanted to shake, but he forced them to stay steady. This was important. This was everything. "Dr. Moore is a xenobiologist," Helen said. "Kevin, how long have we been on Cathera Prime?" 18 hours, Ambassador. "And in that time, what have you learned about the local ecosystem?" Kevin activated his data pad, and the holographic display above the platform filled with images and data. Charts, graphs, molecular structures, all spinning in three-dimensional space. "Cathera Prime has a unique atmospheric composition," he began, falling into his teaching voice. "There are trace elements of argon-7 and a pollen-like substance from the native flora. I've analyzed 7 different potential allergens, 3 types of microorganisms that could affect human digestion, and mapped the nutritional content of 16 local food sources." He looked up at the assembly, making eye contact with as many different species as he could. "I've also begun preliminary work on a vaccine protocol that would allow humans to safely consume Vryn cuisine. And I've identified 3 local plants that could be synthesized into medicines compatible with human biochemistry." The assembly had gone very quiet. Kevin could hear the soft hum of the translation devices, the rustle of movement from thousands of beings. But no one spoke. A Chithrax delegate leaned forward, its insect eyes unblinking. "In 18 hours? How is this possible?" Kevin felt a genuine smile cross his face. Pattern recognition, comparative analysis, adaptive learning. It's what humans do. We see a new environment and we immediately start figuring out how to survive in it, how to use it, how to thrive in it. It's not something I decided to do. It's automatic. It's how my brain works. Helen nodded and took over. "Every human here has been doing the same thing since we arrived. Lieutenant Peterson, would you share your observations?" Jake stepped forward from where he'd been standing with the rest of the delegation. "I've mapped 17 different escape routes from this building and identified 3 structural weaknesses that could be exploited in an emergency. I've noted the location of every emergency system, every power conduit, every potential choke point." He pointed to various sections of the building as he spoke. "I've also analyzed foot traffic patterns, identified which corridors are most heavily used and which are typically empty. In a crisis situation, I know exactly how to evacuate our team safely." Amy joined him. "And I've been watching all of you," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "Not because I was ordered to, just because that's what I do automatically." She gestured to a Vryn guard standing near one of the exits. "Your species is top-heavy. Strong upper body, powerful arms and claws, but your legs are relatively weak compared to your mass. In close combat, a low sweep would be effective. You're also vulnerable at the joints where your armor plates meet. There are gaps there necessary for movement, but they're weak points. The Vryn guard shifted uncomfortably, and Amy turned to a Chithrax delegate. Your exoskeleton is impressive protection, but it limits flexibility. You have blind spots at your rear quadrants because your eyes are forward-facing, and your body structure doesn't allow you to turn quickly, and your reliance on pheromone communication means you're susceptible to chemical disruption. The aliens were definitely uncomfortable now. Some were shifting in their seats, others were clicking or humming or making whatever sounds indicated distress in their species. Krathax rose to his full, impressive height. You dare threaten us in our own assembly hall? Helen held up a hand. Not a threat, Delegate Krathax. A demonstration. This is what humans do automatically. We don't even think about it. We assess, we analyze, we adapt. It's not conscious aggression. It's survival instinct from a planet that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. She paused, letting that sink in. You asked where our weapons are. Every human is a weapon. Our brains process threats and opportunities faster than most species' computers. Our bodies produce adrenaline that temporarily increases our strength by 40%. We can function with injuries that would incapacitate other species. We heal from wounds that would kill others. And most importantly, we never ever stop trying to survive. Lisa stepped forward now, adding her voice to the demonstration. I'm a tactical officer. In the time we've been in this hall, I've counted 47 potential threats. I've calculated the blast radius of the power cores I can see. I've estimated crowd dynamics if panic were to break out. I've planned 6 different defensive scenarios depending on the type and location of an attack. She looked around at the assembled delegates. I wasn't ordered to do this. I wasn't even consciously thinking about doing it. It just happened. Because that's what 3 million years of evolution on a death world creates. A species that turns everything into a weapon, and every situation into a tactical problem to solve. The silence in the assembly hall was complete. Not even the translation devices made noise. Finally, an elderly alien from a species Lisa didn't recognize spoke up. Its voice was thin and whispery. Are you saying that all humans are soldiers? Helen shook her head firmly. No. We're saying all humans are survivors. Dr. Moore isn't military. He's a scientist. But put him in an unknown environment and he'll master it within hours. Give him a problem and he'll solve it. Threaten him, and he'll find a way to neutralize that threat using nothing but his mind and whatever materials are available. Kevin nodded. It's true. I've never had combat training. But if I needed to defend myself, I could. Because I understand chemistry, biology, physics. I know which plants are poisonous and which are edible. I know how to create simple weapons from basic materials. I know how to find water, build shelter, treat injuries. Not because I studied survival specifically, but because all human knowledge builds on itself. Everything I've ever learned could be used to help me survive. Helen stepped to the center of the platform again. You wanted to see our weapons? You're looking at them. 6 humans standing here, and each one of us is analyzing this room, this situation, all of you. We're thinking about possibilities and problems and solutions. We're adapting to a brand new environment, filled with species we'd never even imagined until a few months ago. And we're doing it automatically, without effort. Because that's what humans are built to do. She smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. Imagine what we could do if we actually tried. Imagine what humanity could contribute to the assembly. We don't just want to join your community. We want to make it better. We want to solve problems, explore new worlds, push the boundaries of what's possible. Because that's what we do. That's what we've always done. Another delegate spoke up, this one from a species with fur and large, intelligent eyes. You speak of adaptation and survival. But these are individual skills. How do humans work together? Many species here have hive minds or telepathic links. How do you coordinate without such connections? Helen gestured to her team. Language, art, mathematics, music. We created complex communication systems because we needed them to survive. We share knowledge across generations through teaching and writing. Every human builds on the knowledge of every human who came before. When one human learns something useful, all humans eventually benefit. Jake added, and we're good at working with people who are different from us. On Earth. The assembly session had ended in chaos. Delegates argued in dozens of languages, creating a wall of sound that the translation devices couldn't process. Some species seemed excited about humanity's presentation. Others looked worried or even frightened. A few, like Krathax, sat in silence, their expressions unreadable. Helen and her team were escorted back to their quarters by Pip, who kept his large eyes fixed forward and said nothing. The small Paxian was usually chatty, but now he seemed troubled. Their quarters offered a view of the city below, where alien life went about its business under the purple sky. Lisa stood at the window watching lights begin to appear as the sun set. Everything here was so strange, so different from Earth. Yet her brain had already started mapping the streets, noting patterns in the traffic flow, identifying potential landmarks. She couldn't turn it off, this constant analysis. None of them could. Jake had removed his formal jacket and was pacing the room. "That went better than expected," he said. "We got their attention, at least." "Maybe too much attention," Kevin replied. He was studying his datapad, reviewing the biological scans he'd taken during the presentation. "Did you see how some of them looked at us? Like we were dangerous." "We are dangerous," Amy said from where she sat on the edge of a chair. That was kind of the whole point. Before anyone could respond, the door chimed. Pip entered and his fur was standing on end. In the brief time they'd known the Paxian, they'd learned that meant he was very upset about something. "Ambassador Cooper," Pip said, his voice higher than usual. "We have a serious problem. Delegate Krathax has invoked the right of challenge." Helen set down the glass of water she'd been drinking. "Explain what that means, Pip." The small alien's ears drooped. "It is an ancient tradition in the Assembly. If a delegate questions another species' fitness for membership, they can demand a practical demonstration. Krathax wants proof that humans are as capable as you claim to be." Kevin frowned. "What kind of proof?" "A survival scenario," Pip said quietly. "Krathax is proposing that a human representative be placed in a hostile environment with no tools, no weapons, no help. If they survive for 72 hours, humanity's membership will be approved immediately." The room went very quiet. Lisa felt her stomach drop. "And if they don't survive?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then humanity's application will be rejected for a minimum of 50 standard years, and everyone in the galaxy will know that humans failed the challenge." Amy stood up quickly. "I'll do it. I'm trained for survival situations. Send me." "No," Helen said immediately. "This is a diplomatic matter. I'll be the one to accept the challenge." Jake stepped forward. "With respect, Ambassador, you're too valuable. If something happens to you, humanity loses its best diplomat. I'm military. I've done survival training. Let me take the challenge." Helen looked at her team, seeing the determination in their faces. They were all willing to risk their lives for humanity's future. Good people. Brave people. But this wasn't just about bravery. "The challenge is political," Helen said slowly, thinking through the implications. "Krathax doesn't just doubt humans in general. He doubts me specifically. He thinks I was making empty claims in the Assembly. If I accept his challenge and succeed, it proves I meant every word. It shows that even a diplomat, not a soldier, can survive through adaptation and intelligence. Or if you fail, it proves that everything you said was exaggeration," Lisa said bluntly. "It destroys humanity's credibility completely." Before anyone could argue further, the air in the center of the room shimmered. A hologram appeared showing Krathax's massive form. The Vryn looked even more intimidating as a projection somehow. "Ambassador Cooper, I trust you have been informed of my challenge." "I have, Delegate Krathax." Helen stepped forward to face the hologram. "And I accept your challenge." The Vryn's eyes narrowed slightly. "You understand the terms? 72 hours in the forbidden zones of Cathara Prime. No communication devices, no weapons of any kind, no assistance from anyone." "I understand. The forbidden zones are called such for good reason, Ambassador. The wildlife alone has killed trained Vryn warriors. The terrain is treacherous. The weather can shift from calm to deadly within minutes. Even with all our natural advantages, my people fear these places." Helen met his gaze without blinking. "I understand the risks, Delegate Krathax. I accept them." Something flickered across the Vryn's face. Was it respect, concern? The hologram wasn't clear enough to tell. "Very well. The challenge begins at dawn tomorrow. May whatever gods you believe in protect you, human. You will need their help." The hologram disappeared, leaving the team in shocked silence. Kevin found his voice first. "Ambassador, this is insane." "You heard what he said. Vryn warriors have died in those zones. Warriors with claws and armor and natural weapons. You're going in with nothing." "Not nothing," Helen said quietly. "I'm going in with everything humanity has learned about survival over 3 million years. That's more than claws or armor. She turned to face them all. I need your help. Kevin, tell me everything you know about Cathara Prime's ecology. Lisa, tactical assessment of the forbidden zones using all available data. Jake, Amy, survival strategies and resource management. We have until dawn. Let's make sure I'm as prepared as possible. The team looked at each other, then nodded. If their ambassador was going to risk her life for humanity's future, they would make sure she had every advantage they could give her. The night was long and intense. Kevin pulled up every scrap of information he'd gathered about Cathara Prime's biosphere. The planet was classified as a Class 4 hostile environment, which meant it was dangerous even for species adapted to harsh conditions. The forbidden zones are the worst parts of an already dangerous planet, Kevin explained, projecting images onto the wall. The northern zone, where Krathax chose to send you, is a jungle region. The canopy is so thick that sunlight barely reaches the ground. The floor is a maze of ravines, sinkholes, and underground rivers. He zoomed in on images of the local wildlife. The predators are the main concern. There are ground hunters, canopy hunters, aquatic hunters, and ambush predators. Most of them are larger than Earth animals and significantly more aggressive. Lisa had pulled topographical maps and was marking them with notes. Water sources are throughout the zone, which is good. But most of them are inhabited by what the locals call throat rippers. The translation isn't great, but they seem to be amphibious predators, big, fast, and territorial. What about shelter? Helen asked, studying the maps over Lisa's shoulder. Cave systems in the cliff faces on the eastern edge of the zone. But caves mean you're sheltering in places other creatures also use. Safer option might be building something in the trees, but then you're exposed to the canopy predators. Jake spread out a different set of maps. There's a river running through the center of the zone. If you can reach it and follow it downstream, it leads to the boundary. That's about 40 kilometers through difficult terrain. Helen absorbed all of this, her mind already working through scenarios. Water, shelter, food, defense. The basics of survival, but in an alien environment with alien threats. Amy had been quiet, but now she spoke up. Ambassador, you need to remember something. You're not trying to conquer this place. You're just trying to survive it. Don't take unnecessary risks. Don't try to prove anything beyond what's required. Stay alive for 72 hours. That's the whole mission. Helen nodded. Survive. I can do that. Humans are good at surviving. As dawn approached, Helen stood on the launch pad wearing simple, durable clothing. No technology, no tools, no weapons. Just herself and whatever the Forbidden Zone would provide. Krathax was there, along with several other delegates who had come to witness the challenge. The Vryn approached her, and for the first time he didn't seem hostile. He seemed almost concerned. Last chance to withdraw, Ambassador Cooper. There is no shame in recognizing the limits of your abilities. Challenging oneself is admirable, but foolishness is not. Helen smiled up at the massive alien. Delegate Krathax, you asked where my weapon was. She tapped the side of her head. You're looking at it. This is what humans use to survive impossible situations. And we've survived a lot of impossible situations over the years. Krathax studied her for a long moment, then stepped back. I will watch your progress with interest, Ambassador. I find myself hoping you succeed, though I doubt you will. The transport arrived, a small craft that would carry her to the Forbidden Zone. Helen turned to her team one last time. They stood together, their faces tight with worry but also with confidence. 72 hours, Kevin said. We'll be watching the satellite feeds. We'll be rooting for you every second. Come back to us, Lisa added simply. Helen nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She climbed into the transport and the door sealed behind her. The flight to the Forbidden Zone was short. Through the viewport, Helen watched the civilized city fall away, replaced by increasingly wild terrain. The jungle rose up like a green wall, dense and impenetrable from above. The transport found a small clearing and descended. As soon as Helen stepped out, it lifted off immediately, leaving her alone. The silence was immediate and complete. Then slowly the sounds of the jungle began to filter through, calls and cries, rustles and movements. The jungle air was thick enough to feel like breathing through wet cloth. Helen moved carefully through the undergrowth, placing each foot with deliberate care. Every sound made her freeze and listen. Every shadow could hide a predator. The transport had left her in a clearing, but she knew better than to stay there. Open spaces meant visibility, and visibility meant being seen by things that might want to eat her. She needed to move, find water, establish some kind of shelter before the sun set. The trees around her were massive, their trunks wider than cars and stretching up into a canopy so dense that only dim, greenish light filtered through. The bark was strange, rough but also slightly slick, with an oily texture that probably protected against insects or fungi. Helen filed that information away. Everything she learned could be useful. A sound to her left made her stop completely. Something was moving through the bushes, coming closer. Helen's heart rate spiked and she felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. Her muscles tensed, ready for fight or flight. Her vision sharpened, focusing on the direction of the sound. The creature that emerged was about the size of a large dog, but that's where the similarity ended. It had 6 legs covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors as it moved. Its head was mostly mouth, filled with rows of sharp teeth. The eyes were on stalks that swiveled independently, giving it a wide field of vision. The creature saw her and stopped. Its eye stalks focused on her, and Helen could almost see it thinking, calculating. Was this thing food? Was it dangerous? Worth the risk? Helen didn't run. Running would trigger the chase instinct, and this thing looked built for speed. Instead, she made herself bigger. She raised her arms above her head, making her silhouette larger. Then she yelled, a sharp, loud sound that echoed through the jungle. The creature jerked backward, startled. Its scales shifted from blue to red, probably some kind of threat display. But Helen held her ground, staying big and loud. After a few tense seconds, the creature decided she wasn't worth the trouble. It backed away, then turned and disappeared into the undergrowth. Helen let out a shaky breath. First encounter survived. Her hands were trembling slightly from the adrenaline, but she was alive and unharmed. That was what mattered. She kept moving, listening for the sound of water. Kevin had said there were streams throughout the zone. She just had to find one and hope it wasn't occupied by those throat-ripper things. After what felt like hours but was probably less than one, she heard it. The soft babble of running water. Helen approached cautiously, using the thick vegetation as cover. The stream was about 3 meters wide, flowing quickly over smooth stones. The water looked clear, which was a good sign. Helen crouched at the edge, watching for several minutes. No movement in the water, no signs of predators. She found a stick and prodded the water, testing the depth and looking for anything hiding beneath the surface. When nothing attacked the stick, she carefully cupped her hands and drank. The water was cold and tasted slightly mineral, but it was water. Helen drank slowly, knowing her stomach would need time to adjust to the local microorganisms. Humans had tough digestive systems, evolved to handle a variety of foods and water sources, but there were limits. With water secured, she turned her attention to shelter. The sun was already beginning to lower, and she had maybe 3 hours before full darkness. The cliff faces Kevin had mentioned were too far away. She'd have to build something here. Helen looked up at the massive trees. Building a shelter in the branches would keep her off the ground, away from whatever prowled the jungle floor at night. It would also make her vulnerable to canopy predators, but everything was a trade-off. She selected a tree with strong, evenly spaced branches about 10 meters up. The climb was hard. The bark was slippery and her muscles were already tired from the stress and exertion. But humans were good climbers. Their ancestors had lived in trees and some of that ability remained. At a junction where 3 large branches met, Helen began gathering materials. Smaller branches, large leaves, strips of fibrous bark that she pulled from a dead section of trunk. Her hands worked quickly, tying knots and weaving materials together. She wasn't thinking about the techniques consciously. Her hands just knew what to do, drawing on memories of camping trips, survival training, and something deeper. The knowledge of countless ancestors who had built shelters from natural materials to protect themselves from the elements and predators. The shelter wasn't beautiful, but it was functional. A platform to sit on, walls and a roof to provide cover from above and the sides. Helen tested each knot, each connection point, making sure it would hold her weight. As she finished, darkness began to fall. It happened quickly in the jungle, the dim green light fading to black within minutes. The temperature dropped noticeably, and Helen wished she had something warmer to wear. But her body adapted. She began shivering, her muscles generating heat. She pulled her limbs in close, minimizing surface area to conserve warmth. Humans had survived ice ages with nothing but fire and animal skins. One cold night in an alien jungle wouldn't kill her. The night was long and filled with sounds. Things howled and screamed in the darkness. Heavy footsteps shook the ground below her tree. Something large crashed through the undergrowth, destroying smaller trees in its path. Helen stayed absolutely still, barely breathing. She had tied herself to the branch with strips of bark, so even if she fell asleep, she wouldn't fall to her death. It was uncomfortable, but it was safe. As the hours crawled past, Helen's mind wandered. She thought about her team, watching her progress from orbit. Thought about Krathax, probably expecting her to be dead by morning. Thought about Earth so far away. But mostly she thought about survival, about every human who had ever faced impossible odds and somehow made it through. The early humans who had fought off predators with nothing but rocks and sticks. The explorers who had crossed deserts and oceans. The ordinary people who had survived wars and disasters through sheer determination. She was carrying all of them with her. Their knowledge, their courage, their stubborn refusal to give up. That was humanity's real strength, not individual power, but the accumulation of millions of years of learning and adaptation. Dawn came slowly, the darkness gradually lightening to gray, then to that strange greenish light of the jungle. Helen was stiff, cold, and exhausted, but alive. She descended from her shelter carefully, testing each handhold. The forest floor was covered in morning mist, reducing visibility. Helen moved cautiously toward the stream for more water. She needed food. Her stomach was empty, and while humans could survive weeks without eating, she would need energy for the challenges ahead. Kevin's briefing had mentioned plants with edible tubers. She just had to find them. As she searched, Helen found herself observing the jungle with new eyes. What had seemed like hostile wilderness yesterday was beginning to reveal patterns. The way certain plants grew near water. The paths worn by animals moving to drinking spots. The signs of what areas were safe and which ones to avoid. She found the tubers growing near a fallen log. The plants looked like something between a fern and a small tree, with thick roots that bulged with stored nutrients. Helen dug one up carefully and examined it. It looked similar to the images Kevin had shown her. She cut a small piece with a sharp rock and tasted it cautiously, slightly sweet, starchy. Her body didn't immediately reject it, which was a good sign. She ate slowly, giving her digestive system time to process this alien food. If it was going to make her sick, she wanted to know sooner rather than later. The cliff faces were her goal for day 2. Natural caves would provide better shelter than her tree platform, and the elevation would give her a strategic advantage. Plus, if the river really did lead out of the forbidden zone, the cliffs would position her well for the final day's journey. The trek was brutal. The terrain shifted from relatively flat jungle to steep rocky slopes. The ground was covered in loose stones that slid dangerously under her feet. Twice she nearly fell into hidden gaps between rocks. Once she had to freeze and hide while something huge and angry smashed through the area, roaring challenges at invisible rivals. But she made progress. Slow, careful progress. Every meter gained was a small victory. By midday, she could see the cliff faces rising above the canopy. They were taller than she'd expected. Sheer walls of gray stone that looked impossibly hard to climb. But there were caves visible, dark openings at various heights. Helen approached the base of the cliffs cautiously. This was predator territory. Animals used caves for dens, and disturbing them could be fatal. She chose a cave about halfway up the cliff face, high enough to be defensible, but not so high that she couldn't reach it. The climb was terrifying. The rock was rough but also crumbly in places, with handholds that broke away without warning. Her muscles screamed in protest. Her fingers were raw and bleeding. But she kept climbing because stopping meant falling, and falling meant death. The cave entrance was narrow, just wide enough for Helen to squeeze through. Inside, the space opened up into a chamber about 3 meters across. The floor was littered with old bones. Helen's heart sank. Something had used this cave recently enough to leave remains, but the bones were old, dry, and brittle. Whatever predator had denned here was long gone. She cleared the bones out, establishing her own. The lead hunter pulled itself over the cave ledge with fluid grace. Its 6 eyes adjusted to the darkness, focusing on Helen's silhouette at the back of the cave. The creature was beautiful in a terrible way, all lean muscle and natural weapons. Behind it, 4 more hunters gathered, blocking the cave entrance. Helen controlled her breathing, forcing her heart rate to stay steady. Fear was natural, but panic would kill her. She needed to think clearly, move precisely, strike at exactly the right moment. The lead hunter moved deeper into the cave, its claws clicking on stone. The others began to follow, and that was the mistake Helen had been waiting for. In the confined space, they were bunching up, getting in each other's way. Helen moved explosively, hurling the sharpened bone at the lead hunter's face. Years of playing softball as a kid, countless hours of training her body to move efficiently all came together in that one throw. The bone struck one of the creature's eyes with a wet sound. The hunter shrieked, a high-pitched wail that echoed off the cave walls. In the same motion, Helen grabbed a fist-sized rock and charged forward. The hunters expected prey to run away, to flee in terror. They didn't expect prey to attack. Helen's rock connected with another hunter's skull. She felt the impact jar up her arm, felt bone crack under the stone. She didn't stop moving, staying low, using the confused predators as shields between her and the cave entrance. She grabbed another bone, this one longer and sharper, and slashed at exposed tendons in a third hunter's leg. The creature stumbled and Helen kicked it hard, sending it crashing into its packmates. The cave became chaos. 5 hunters designed for coordinated attacks on fleeing prey were completely disorganized by this aggressive, strategic response. They crashed into each other, their claws scraping uselessly on stone instead of soft flesh. Helen fought with everything she had. She went for eyes, for joints, for anything vulnerable. When one hunter lunged at her, she used its own momentum, shoving it hard into the cave wall. When another tried to bite, she jammed a stone into its open mouth, feeling teeth shatter. She took damage. Claws raked her left arm, leaving deep cuts that bled freely. Another strike caught her shoulder, tearing skin and muscle. A third hunter's tail whipped around and caught her across the ribs. But pain was just information. Pain told her she was still alive, still fighting. She could deal with pain. After what felt like hours but was probably less than 2 minutes, the hunters broke. They'd lost 2 of their pack. One dead from multiple strikes to its head and neck, another bleeding out from severed tendons and a crushed skull. The remaining 3 fled, scrambling down the cliff face and disappearing into the jungle below. Helen collapsed against the cave wall, breathing hard. Blood ran down her arm and dripped onto the stone floor. Her shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. Her ribs ached where the tail had struck her. But she was alive. She tore strips from her already damaged clothing and bound her wounds as best she could. The cuts were deep but not fatal. Her immune system, evolved to fight off countless diseases and infections on Earth, would handle the alien bacteria. Her blood was already clotting, sealing the wounds. As dawn broke on her 3rd day, Helen emerged from the cave. She was battered, bloody, and running on nothing but determination and the last reserves of her energy. But she only needed to last a few more hours. The extraction point was 40 kilometers away, following the river downstream. Helen began walking, every step hurt. Her wounded arm hung mostly useless at her side. Her shoulder felt like it was on fire. Her ribs protested with every breath. But she walked. Humans were persistence hunters. They didn't sprint like cheetahs or overpower prey like bears. They just walked, hour after hour, day after day, until whatever they were hunting collapsed from exhaustion. Helen walked now with that same relentless determination. The river led her through the jungle, a thread of water cutting through the green hell. She saw the throat rippers Kevin had warned about, massive amphibians with jaws full of serrated teeth, but she spotted them first, using her elevated position on the riverbank to stay out of their territory. She saw other predators too, things that watched her from the canopy, from the undergrowth, from burrows in the riverbank, but they all made the same calculation. This creature was injured, yes, but it was also dangerous. It had killed pack hunters. It moved with purpose and awareness. Easier prey existed elsewhere. The final kilometers blurred together. Helen's mind drifted, her body moving on autopilot. She thought about her team, about Earth, about all the humans who would benefit if she succeeded here. But mostly she just focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Walk, rest, drink water, walk some more. Simple, basic survival. The extraction point appeared through the trees like a mirage. The same clearing where she'd been dropped off 71 hours earlier. But now it was filled with transports and crowds of alien delegates. Helen emerged from the jungle at exactly the 71-hour mark. Her clothing was torn and stained with blood, both hers and the hunters. Her hair was tangled with mud and leaves. Her face was scratched and bruised. Her left arm wrapped in makeshift bandages. She looked like she'd fought a war. She looked absolutely magnificent. Krathax stood at the front of the assembled delegates. The massive Vryn was silent for a long moment, just staring at her. Then slowly he dropped to one knee. It was a gesture of profound respect in Vryn culture. Ambassador Helen Cooper, he said, his voice carrying across the silent clearing. You have proven the worth of humanity beyond any doubt. The Assembly grants Earth full membership, effective immediately. Helen nodded, too exhausted for words, but she met Krathax's eyes and smiled. The Vryn delegate rose and approached her carefully, as if worried she might collapse. I owe you an apology, Ambassador. I thought humans were weak because you lacked natural weapons. I was completely wrong. You don't lack weapons. You make them from whatever you can reach, from rocks and bones and sticks and pure determination. He gestured to the other delegates, many of whom were watching video feeds of Helen's 3 days in the Forbidden Zone. We all watched your journey. We saw you outsmart predators that have killed trained Vryn warriors. We saw you adapt to a hostile environment with nothing but your mind. We saw you fight when fighting was the only option and win against impossible odds. Krathax's voice was filled with genuine admiration. We saw what it means to be human. Helen finally found her voice, though it came out rough and tired. What it means to be human is that we never stop trying. We fail, we learn, we adapt, we try again. We've been doing it for millions of years. We'll keep doing it for millions more. She looked around at the assembled aliens, at species with claws and armor and venom and 100 other natural advantages. You asked where my weapon was. Now you know. It's here. She tapped her head with her good hand. And here. She placed that hand over her heart. Every human carries these weapons. We can't turn them off. We can't unlearn them. They're built into who we are. Pip pushed through the crowd, the small Paxian's eyes wide with awe and relief. Ambassador, you have become a legend already. The human who survived the Forbidden Zone. They will write songs about this across the galaxy. Helen smiled tiredly. Just make sure the songs mention that I had incredible support. My team prepared me as well as anyone could be prepared. None of this would have been possible without them. As if summoned, her team emerged from one of the transports. Kevin rushed forward with a medical scanner, already checking her injuries. Lisa and Jake flanked her protectively, their relief obvious. Amy grinned with fierce pride. Told you, Amy said simply. Every human is a weapon. The medical treatment was quick but thorough. Kevin supervised personally, amazed by what he was seeing. Your white blood cell count is elevated by almost 300%, he said, studying the scanner readings. Your body is fighting off at least a dozen potential infections simultaneously. And these wounds, they're already starting to heal. The deeper cuts will scar, but the healing process has already begun. That's just human biology, Helen said. We evolved to survive injuries. Our ancestors couldn't afford to die from every cut or infection. The ones who healed well survived to pass on their genes. That evening, the assembly held a formal session to officially welcome Earth. Helen stood before them again, cleaned up and wearing fresh clothes, though she moved stiffly from her injuries. Honored delegates, she began. Humanity accepts membership in this assembly with gratitude and excitement for the future. We come from a difficult world and it made us strong, but it also taught us the value of cooperation, of shared knowledge, of working together to solve problems. She paused, looking around the vast hall. You've seen what one human can do when pushed to the absolute limits. Now imagine what we can achieve together. Humans working alongside Vryn, Chithrax, Milani, Paxians, and all the other species here. Imagine the problems we could solve, the discoveries we could make, the wonders we could create. Krathax stood from his seat. The Vryn have fought countless wars across the centuries. We have valued physical strength above all else. But Ambassador Cooper has shown us a different kind of strength. The strength to adapt, to overcome, to refuse defeat no matter what. This is a strength that all species can learn from and benefit from.